Welcome back to Cox.
I'm Campbell.
I'm Connor.
I almost said your name. I almost said I'm Connor. Great start.
No, you nailed it. It's perfect.
Yeah. All right. We're talking a little podcast about tabletop appreciation and theory.
Appreciation and theory. We have a focused topic today, which we also kind of had last time, but more focused topic,
More
direct
focused,
topic, which is
why we got out of 40K when we got out of 40K and why we are now getting back into 40K.
Exactly.
So this is going to be a very Warhammer heavy
The departure
episode.
Well, because I think there's a lot of, we'll get to it.
Okay.
But, some other games maybe drew us away.
Okay. All right.
You know?
Yeah.
So, okay. So, leaving.
Yeah.
Leaving 40K. So what edition were we in when we left? 6th? No, 7th.
I think 7th. I think the big reason, maybe not like the big reason, but I do think that a big the in my mind it was the changeover from 7th to 8th was kind of because
yes,
like I remember we had played a lot in 6th, like that was our big like edition for us, and then
6th was the main edition. The most time played was probably 6th.
And then 7th came out, and we played a fair bit in 7th. But I also feel like, and I'm kind of just pulling shit out of my ass here. I could have looked this up. I could have done some research or some prep, but I didn't. But I feel like the time between the release of 7th and 8th was not long, and it definitely kind of felt like
7th was like a 6.5.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a cleanup. It was intended to be a cleanup, I think.
Yeah.
There was like some things we were stoked about. Anyway, maybe we should think about what, in leading up to a reason to leave, to say a goodbye, you need to have a starting point, right? So,
okay,
what about, I'm posing a question to you.
Okay.
What about 6th edition 40K or 7th edition 40K was good? Like, what was the starting point of like, okay, this is what I like about this game. This is what is working for me. Because eventually that would have to either externally or internally change.
Is it? Can I say because I was playing Eldar and I always won?
I mean, if that's a reason, yeah.
No. I'm trying to think. I honestly don't know if it was a thing where it was like, maybe it was a little bit of like, this is the only game in town, and it was a thing that I just like, like, I'm trying to look back and think of like things that I did specifically like about it. Is that it was fairly simple. It was fairly straightforward. I definitely think like as they started to add more mechanics in terms of like when we were doing like your warp charge dice and fucking demon summoning started to kind of like bog down the game a little bit,
expand the scope of it.
Yeah, and I think as well because like I think maybe I played like one game of 8th before sort of taking the break, and I think the stratagems, because 8th was around the like introduction of command points, and
that was where those things came in that game.
And I think that was a thing where it was just like, oh, so every like not only am I having to buy like a whole new set of fucking like, because they were doing the like rapid release of doing all the codices that I like, we're sitting here, we have like a couple of books out, and it's like I have 2 Eldar codexes. I have the like codex, the last Codex Eldar, and then the Codex Craft Worlds. So like before they were Eldari, and the dates on those books are like a year apart, you know. And then like thinking of like editions where it's just like, okay, cool. So we're at a point where we're releasing new codexes and releasing new rule books like every
wasn't a thing before, like
18 months.
Like, do you remember when I think when we started playing, you were using a third edition Eldar book, and I had a 5th edition Imperial Guard book in 6th. Like there used to be years.
Oh yeah,
get like a new codex.
So like I think it was just kind of like the rapid way in which books were coming out and the way that like new model releases were happening, and there was a little bit of just like buy the newest thing and it will completely upset the like balance of the meta.
Yeah.
In addition to the core rules having like a whole bunch of new mechanics. And it was at a time maybe where the outside of our sort of like smaller group that we played with, if you were doing pickup games, if you were doing shop games or events, it was very like min-max competitive. Like just the overall culture of the game was starting to skew a lot more towards just like, oh, hey, they just released a new rule book with like this new mechanic. How can I break that? Like it seemed like a lot of people were approaching the game with like, how can I break the game as opposed to how can I play the game? So I think it was like a company issue as well as a culture issue that kind of fed into each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's also like the edition changes a lot. And like we'll get to like we played when we get to when we're back 9th, we're playing with stratagems, we're playing with command points, blah, blah, blah.
Oh yeah.
But like when a new edition comes out, if a lot changes and it like doesn't click right away, I feel like it's like totally natural to like bounce. Like I remember when this shitty edition, 4th edition of D&D, like that came out and like I tried it and I was like, fuck this. Like I'm just
what is an action surge anyway?
Exactly. And then I just didn't play it for like years after that until like
sure, yeah.
And but I think like okay, the thing with when command points and shit comes in, you go from, and this was happening in 7th and stuff. And this is why I fucking hated playing your Eldar army, because like,
well, which is also like I want to say why I started switching to like playing orcs and why I picked up like I forgot until we were looking through these books. I forgot that I had a Grey Knights army.
True, yeah.
I was like, what's this book? Who's
it's like the thing where you play the game in a predictable way. Not a predictable way to play the game, but the game is predictable in the sense that like I know what your army can physically do on the table. You shoot, you move. You
have an expectation of like this is how my dudes work, so that the way that your dudes work should be comparable.
Yes, and you can kind of plan for that and plan around it and like develop a way of trying to win the game. Because if I infantry can only move this far, so I know it's going to take this long to get the objective, and so if I can fuck you up over here, you're going to have a hard time getting to the objective, blah blah blah. But like the more rules you stack onto that of like exceptions, it becomes really difficult to plan. And so when 8th happened and there's stratagems and stuff and all, it's like you have to really learn a new game. And it's like, if I don't know exactly what your army can do, I can't plan around it, which is a difficult thing to get your head around.
And it definitely became like, because I remember when we like first started playing, there's kind of a fun element of like, you and I having our one-on-one arms race of Eldar versus Imperial Guard of like who can bring the biggest anti-tank weapon.
Yeah.
And then you start playing, like our buddy Connor's like Orc army, or we start playing against like, a buddy of ours had like Necrons, and like there was kind of a fun element of like, wait, that dude does what?
Yeah. Like is where the fantasy element of like 40K comes in. It's like,
but then it's like, it's a thing where it's like, rather than having, like Necron reanimation protocols is like one fun special rule that the entire army has. And then it started to become kind of a thing where it's like, it felt like a lot of individual units. It was like, oh, my guy does this and this and this. And it's like, you're like, it gets to a point where it felt like the people writing the rules are like, when you're like a kid on the playground, you're like, nuh-uh, I'm actually immune to that. Like, it's like, all right, cool.
So you also like, I remember when you stopped or like were fizzling out of 40K, like before you'd even like stop, because we still play games here now. You got really into D&D, like really started, like playing in like 2 or 3 groups at a time.
Yeah.
And like, what did that scratch that like 40K wasn't?
I feel like D&D and like tabletop role playing in general, because I was also starting to branch out and like trying, like it was like I got really into D&D 3.5 and I was like running like a game or two of 3.5, and then like I had another buddy who was doing like 5th, and some other friends were starting to do like sort of one-offs of like Star Wars systems and like a couple of other things. And it really like sort of like the free form kind of like when you play in a role-playing game, it's like it's that improvisation of like yes and or yes but are sort of like the best words that you can hear, where it's like you're not sort of locked down to like, oh, my character has, this is the weapon that it has and this is the stat that it has, and the only action that it can take is to like shoot its bolter at a orc.
The games that got predictable.
Totally, yeah.
Like,
and like
you could tell when a game was not gonna go your way pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. And I think as well that like sort of having that thing where it's like, oh, I don't have to, like, it's a different style of game. It's obviously, it's like a war game is a war game. You're there to fucking like kill shit and take objectives. And playing something that was less adversarial and playing something that was more like collaborative, especially in what I was talking about before, where with the codex creep and the rules releases and the way that the like general gaming culture was about like breaking that system and just being the best at winning. It was like a thing where it's like D&D was more sitting down with like 4 people, spending the same amount of time that I would play 40K for, but like crushing a couple of beers and just like everybody working together to like have the most fun instead of like win the game. So it was still that kind of like, oh, I'm doing fantasy, I'm rolling dice. This is just as nerdy as the other thing. It scratches that nerd itch, but in a way that felt way less sort of like adversarial. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Which like, does that play into you coming back into it, like the opposite direction? Because like, do you miss the adversarial smash?
I guess like here's the other thing I think is that like playing 40K has never been my favorite part of this hobby.
Oh yeah, 100%.
That like I think first and foremost like the modeling aspect of it has always been kind of.
Well, hold on, let me interject for 1 second.
Okay, sure, yeah.
So playing the game, but a full ass table, fully painted. Like,
that shit kicks ass.
That shit fucking goes.
Oh,
man.
dude, that rules. Yeah, 100%.
I remember like the best game that's like always in my mind is like at a store here in Toronto. They had the I don't know if it was like a Forge World table. Do you remember the one?
Is that Meeple?
A Meeple.
Yeah. It was like a Forge World like factory.
And it was
fucking...
like fucking painted up, and I played like my drop pod marines against your orcs.
Yeah.
And it was just like the table was painted immaculately. Both of us were fully painted. Drop pods coming down, like tac squads coming out.
You can say we were painted immaculately.
We were we were painted to the nines as far as we could paint. But like, and it just looked awesome.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, this is like, I don't remember how that game went at all. Like, I don't fucking, who cares? But like, it was so cool. Like, that's, anyway, go ahead. But like that part I think is like what you remember from playing, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And so like I think more so it was a thing where it was like my favorite part of the hobby was definitely like building shit and converting shit, which is why I was like doing that orc army and like, and it got to a point where I was like, well, I don't really have like, I have all the orcs that I want to have right now.
Yeah.
Or like I have all the orcs that I can afford to have right now. Like I got to a point where I was like, I can't really justify buying any more models. Like, I don't have space in my apartment. I don't really have money to like throw to that when I already have like, you know, 2,500 points of orcs and like 3,000 points of Eldar. And it's like, I don't need, I can put my money elsewhere. I don't need to fucking.
There is kind of like a wall you can hit where it's like.
Yeah. Well, and because it's a thing where it's like, I could start a new army, but then I would just be like playing catch up as compared to like everybody else that we're playing with. And like no one else that we were playing with were really at a point where they're like, yeah, I want to do like 5,000 points. I want to do fucking like,
which like, I will never get to that.
Oh yeah. Like and which is fine if you're into that. That's fucking sick.
Like it would be like a whole day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So like, I think it was kind of a thing where it was just like, oh, like I'm not getting the modeling aspect out of this anymore. So the game was always kind of a thing to do with the models after I had done the part that I liked.
Which is why like, I think, the more like skirmish game style thing is really like promising in the sense of like keeping you in it,
totally
like the royal you in it, because it's like, yeah, I don't have to, if I need to scratch that model itch, I just have to like, I can just bash up like a cool character, and then I can still play with him in like way less of the time at the same time as you like, you know, build up an army for whatever, like when you, because like it's the same thing with like did I like when 8th happens? Like, do I want to like the whole Primaris thing? Like, I fucking love the Primaris models. Huge fan of them. The lore fucking stinks, but you know, it happened, and I'm like, am I not gonna buy a new army of the army I already have and like paint it? Like, I'm just not gonna do that.
Yeah.
Now I'm doing it, but like,
yeah.
At the time, like, so I sold like all my Space Marines, all my Chaos, all like everything. I didn't have like anything for like until now, basically.
Yeah. So what was like, I don't know, does it like what I'm saying about like, I guess like the general culture of like playing and sort of like the way that the releases were happening, like was that, because I think that's really what it boils down to for me, was just that it was like, it was so adversarial, it was so kind of like meta-y and less about like lore or just hanging out and having a good time. Does that resonate with you? Because you definitely stuck with it a little further into 8th than I did.
I think like, I can't remember how long, because I remember you kind of phasing out, like just not phasing out in the terms of like you were never like, I'm done with 40K. Like, you were just like spending more of your hobby free time playing D&D. Like,
yeah,
I noticed
like,
that at the time. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah. Oh, I can't go to the hobby shop on Wednesday night because my third D&D group is playing that night.
But like, I remember like, it's weird because I was like fully like, when 8th came out, like I was fucking stoked. I remember like looking at their website when they were like previewing the rules every time and like talking with the Hogtown group, being like, what do you think that, oh, this looks like really good, this is gonna work this way. And then like, I think it was less to do with the like meta aspect, because I was really having a good time with 40K in 7th edition, even though there were things about it that I wasn't like. They're kind of in that vein of like, you know, it can get extremely gamey, it can be broken. It's not like, even to this day, it's not like a balanced game, obviously. But then like, it was I guess I just hit a wall where it's like, I don't want to learn a completely new game.
Yeah.
And everyone else seems to have picked it up extremely quickly.
Yeah.
Or like was just more into doing that, because I'm like you, I'm more into like modeling and vibe and like, you know,
this striking scorpion looks cool. Why isn't he also good at the game?
Exactly. But it was like the launch day of 8th edition. I remember like, you know, the hobby shop had like fucking tons of us there. Like, we all got, it was like when every army was released the same day. Like, they had the indexes.
Right. Yeah.
And it was sick because we were all like, picked up the indexes, had to build an army list like that day, and then play, and everybody sucked.
Yeah.
So it was like, great. Everyone's like doing, oh shit, you fucking interrupted me. And like, everyone's getting it wrong, but like, it was great.
Yeah.
And then I just like kept playing games, and I kept fucking like, I didn't want to learn a new rule set. So I was like, you know, I'd kind of pick it up, but I wasn't really like fully into like getting to the level that everyone who like kept that competitive edge from 7th.
Yeah.
And so I just kept losing and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, what? I'll try others. Like, I just stopped for like, you know, and I don't know if it was like, yeah, it's weird. Like, I guess like I wasn't getting maybe the game aspect of it, but also like the modeling aspect of it. I think, like you said, like I kind of hit a wall. Like, I wasn't going to buy a new army.
Yeah.
And then I got into like Flames of War pretty hard, because that was like completely new, like completely different scale, completely different setting. There was like people playing it, and it went simpler. And also like the release schedule was bananas. Like, dude, it's fast now, but that was when it really got fast. Like, I remember all through like 6th, even like 6th edition, people were saying like, oh, it's like the golden age of 40K. Like, we're actually getting things out. Like, there was so much shit that came out. Like, remember, like fortifications, like all this stuff.
Yep.
And like, it became like too much. I just needed like really just needed a break. And that break lasted like 3-4 years, like a long time.
Yeah. It's like, you got kind of overstimulated, right? Where it's like, you're like, oh, like I want to show up. And again, like, I don't know, maybe I'm harping too much. Maybe I just sucked at the game and I'm just being like I'm just like sour grapes because I got my ass kicked so many times. But it's like I bought my orc codex and I had like my orc army that was like,
is this the one, the 8th edition one right here?
yeah, this is the, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I built my like 2,500 point orc list, and I would like show up to play and someone's like, well, I brought like a, you know, like 3 patrol detachments plus an inquisition plus like 2 fortifications, and I took all of my psychic powers from this supplemental book. And I'm like, it's really funny because it's like the reason that I left, like, I actually think that like the funniest way to look at it is like, you're talking about how it's like I stopped playing 40K when I started getting way more into D&D, and I think that like my hard cutoff was at the exact same time that I stopped playing 3.5 in D&D and switched to 5th.
Yeah.
Because 40K in that time was like kind of becoming like D&D 3.5, where you're like, oh, I built my character, like I took a core class from this, and then all of my feats and items are from this book, and I like put skill ranks into, and it was just like, it was kind of a little, to me it felt a little bloated and a little overcomplicated, and it got to a point where like to just play a game, it was like, I was like, I don't need to buy all of these books, you know. I want to show up to play a game where I just like can sit down and play the game.
Yeah. For sure. And that problem is still there today. Like the amount of explaining that you have to do. Like, okay, so we just played our first game in 9th.
Yeah.
And
we should say my first game of 9th.
Yeah,
I've played like had a couple
5-6 games. So
yeah.
If maybe 5, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I like 9th. But so there's this thing that you have to do before that I noticed, where you have to explain your it used to be like, you know, this is my unit, hits on this number, or its strength this, its toughness this, AP is fucking this. That's that unit. Now I'm going to the next unit, give the exact same stats for that unit.
Yeah.
Now when we did 9th edition, you have to go through and if this is like what a normal person does, I'm sure like there are people who are like, if you know the game already and you memorized all the big stratagems, that's fine. But me playing with you in your first game, I have to tell you all of the stratagems. I didn't even explain the Repentia is strength this, blah, blah, blah. I have to explain they're plus this on the charge. They're plus this if they're in proximity with this guy.
So many bubbles.
So many bubbles, but the core is like, I have to go through the stratagems and explain them to you, so I'm not a dick when I spring them on you. But I have to explain the ones that I've prepped, but there's no way I can explain all of them. So I have to like figure out what are the ones that I'm likely going to use and that won't be a bad play experience for you. Not even, and this is a friendly, like if I'm in a competition, like I might have to, I don't know. That's a whole nother thing, but like it's just a lot, man.
So it's like getting into that fucking, like playing that game in 9th last week was like, and like I had a good time. Like I do. It
was great. We had a blast.
Yeah, it's super fun. But it's a thing where it's like, I was thinking like, all right, if I had no background in 40K, this would be impossible to understand. Like,
and even the mechanics that you remember, are like movement and shooting and melee. It's not anything else. Nothing else is really transferable anymore.
And like a lot of the, it is kind of inaccessible in a certain way, where it's like that level of like all of the stratagems and the secondary objectives and the you know, of it all is like, it is a much more complicated game now than when we were getting into it.
Because like I remember like one of the biggest things I couldn't wrap my head around when I was first learning like 6th edition, 5th edition 40K was like, do I get an armor save or a cover save? Do I get both?
Yeah.
Which is like a laughable. It's like you just get one.
Yeah.
You get whichever one is better. Now, like that's like laughably simple. Now all of the things you have to like nothing, and like everything from your army is inapplicable to the next army.
Yeah.
Like I'm playing Sisters, which is an extremely complicated. Like they were here, so I had to get, you know what I mean? But it's like
they're plastic. I need to buy it now.
But like, yeah, fucking a lot of stuff to remember. But the game is fun. Like, and I think it was like I remember telling you before we played like a couple times, like shit dies.
Shit be dying.
Shit be dying. Like holy models be dying.
Yeah. So I'm playing my like 500 point Tyranids army, which again was like a little bit more of a modeling exercise, just something I thought would look cool on the table. No shooting. I have there like this whole list.
And by the way, dear listener, we understand that 500 points is not representative of
at all.
But,
yeah,
but
totally.
fuck you. It's
it
still
off.
Works.
But like watching that Carnifex get mulched in like less than one round of combat.
It's shocking.
I was like, wow, this is a very killy edition, which is cool because I definitely play like I know that my play style is like way less objective based and way more kill as much shit as possible, which is why Tyranids and why orcs, right? Like that's.
But that is one thing that I do like about the objective system. I think it is overburdened. I think that the idea of like secondaries and stuff is like a little too much.
Well, the fact that you're scoring like 9 points a turn, or like,
but that makes
a lot.
So that you it makes it more plausible for someone to get fucked up and still win on points if they're playing to it,
right?
Which is a positive. I don't know if it's like fully there, but like as a design principle and as like something that seems to be working in the games that I've played, like you can kind of rack up points if you do choose the secondaries in the right way, and start scoring them early. But I just don't know if the way that the choosing them and the like keeping track of them is fully as streamlined as it could be.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah. I like that in some regards, like Ninth has kind of like simplified some things. Like I'm so much more in favor of like the way that they're doing the psychic phase, where you're just like, oh, your psychic dude can cast 2 powers. He needs to roll this to cast it, as opposed to like, I have a pool of 11 dice, and I can choose up to...
I remember that came out, I was like, ooh, cool. It's like a mini game.
Resource management. And then it's just like, oh, this game takes an hour longer now.
Like it was either, like in practice, it was either somebody had like fuck-ass tons of dice, and someone had none. Like, like in my Imperial Guard, I brought like a Primaris Psyker, just so I could have something to try to deny your shit. But then you'd also fuck me by being like, I'm going to use my shitty power first. Do you try to deny it? I'm like, no, I'm going to wait for the good power I know you're going to cast. And you're like, I'm not casting it this turn.
Or it would be a thing where it's like, all right, well, now that I've used 1 dice to get my shitty power off, I'm going to use 11 to cast this. And you're like, well, I can only deny one of those. And that was like a thing that definitely slowed down the game, and I do like in this edition that it's just like, all right, cool, I'm just rolling my 2d6. There might be a buff or a debuff based on a bubble, of course.
Yes. I fucking love bubbles.
But like that's great, and like I do really like that element of it. I do like how killy shit is in general. There, like it's more so just like. And the secondary objectives and the command points and the stratagems are all shit that, like, obviously it's just like you're learning a new game, you have to get your head around. But I think of it in terms of like, I have a little bit of a basis of like, I understand how this kind of works. I remember when command points were introduced. I'm trying to think of like our buddy Julian that we're trying to get into 40k through Kill Team right now.
Oh, no chance.
Can you imagine the fucking jump from Kill Team to 9th is enough to kill a man? Like
a lot to keep track of. Like it takes a lot of, like, I'm trying to put my head into someone who's like been playing consistently, and that might be like, I'm sure, like, obviously that's easier, like but I'm trying to think of like me trying to explain 7th to someone who was like someone which was an edition that I was intimately familiar with, like in and out. Do you think that it's like actually, and this is a semi like rhetorical question, do you think it's like actually more complex?
Yes.
Or has it? Okay. Yes.
100%.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
What? All right, if you
That's what I mean. I'm
if
just
you
trying to
stand on
explain-
if you stand on this dot and that dot at the same time, you get 9 points. But if you stand on this dot and that dot at the
Yeah.
same time, you get 2 points.
Yeah.
But if you use one of these resources to raise a flag on that dot and that dot, you get 15 points.
Yeah.
Is like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about?
And that's the thing, is like this is what I'm trying to get across, is like to somebody listening to this who's like, no, it's like this, because I'm doing it right now in my head with that secondary thing, because like I know the actual way that's a secondary objective choice that I made for my army, interacting with like the primary objectives of the.
Oh,
you get what I'm saying.
I'm being facetious here.
No,
like,
I understand, but like you understand what I'm saying is that like
one of our 5 listeners is like, man, this guy's a fucking idiot.
But what I'm trying to get across is that like for a new player, which is what we are, we're both new to 9.
Mm-hmm.
It is fucking complicated.
Yeah,
like there's a lot to get your head around, because you can't be sure as a new player what your opponent is doing at all times.
Yeah.
Whereas like I think if you're a new player in 7th or 6th, you're trying to get a handle on what does my opponent need to roll to hit me when he shoots.
Mm-hmm.
But you always know he's either going to be shooting me or running or charging, or I can't shoot him because he's behind cover.
Yeah.
Now it's like when I'm running my fucking mortifiers at you, and I'm like, I'm going to spend this command point so I can advance and charge. And they get plus this to charge because of my order. And so I'm going to roll my 2d6 and, I'm in your fucking face turn 1. And I just mulched your guy.
And that's kind of the other thing as well, is like, similar, hang on, real quick. I just like jumping back to what we were saying before about like the jump from kill team to 9th, and how like, because previously kill team was a really perfect way to like teach someone the basics of the game, and then be like, all right, cool, now we're gonna play 7th or we're gonna play 8th, and like everything kind of translates. And when they released the new version of kill team, and we were like, why would they fucking take away all of these basic mechanics, like, and I'm realizing now that it's like, oh, the reason that they released the new kill team the way that they did is because it doesn't matter at all. Like kill team in its previous version would not really be a fundamental stepping stone to 9th the way that it was for 7th or 8th. So like,
think? Because like, well, like the kill team 2018 has command points and has like aura things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, yeah.
But you can't. The scope is completely different.
Totally. I think one of the things, going back to the like for the mortifiers, is that like I kind of wonder, and like this ties in with the new kill team as well, where it's like, all right, we gave everything a shitload more wounds to make them more survivable, but to balance that, we gave everything a shit ton more damage to make it way more killy. And there's a thing where it's like, to me, I'm kind of looking at it, and it's like all of the weapons that do like D3 damage, or all of the like models that are like, this thing has 10 attacks on the charge or whatever, are things where it's like,
you can get the same effect with less dice.
Totally. And you know, orc player, I love fucking throwing down a shitload of dice, but that's our thing.
I will say, there's way too many dice in the game.
Yeah,
it's obscene. Like 52, even like, you know, everyone likes rolling a lot of dice. It's fucking, dice is fun. But like, does it need to be rolling 50 dice?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it does not.
Or like, even does like, and then like, even if you're rolling fewer dice,
it can be as lethal mathematically.
Yeah. But even if you are rolling something that's like, oh yeah, this thing only rolls like 5 instead of like 10 or whatever, but each of them does like a d6 of damage, is a thing where it's just like, it's so much, you know? Yeah. And that is, again, like making that,
it negates the amount of, like, the actual amount of dice rolling like you have to. If I kill you by the 6th success on my 50 dice,
yeah,
I definitely didn't need to roll 50 dice.
Yeah.
And yeah, another thing, like, we're gonna get on topic of like why we came back.
Yeah,
just, like,
I was just thinking about that.
But
this wasn't supposed to be like a fucking do's and don'ts of 9th edition from two guys who have played less than 10 games total.
But we're fucking, as we say, we're right.
This is our world. You're just living in it.
Fuck it. Yeah, the fact that this is something that this is something that I learned when I started playing other games, and you kind of get it in D&D a bit too, in different role playing games, tactical role playing games.
Mm-hmm.
In 40K, you, especially in 9th, this wasn't actually the case in some of the previous editions. You are just as effective shooting at maximum range as you are shooting at short range. You are pretty much just as effective shooting at someone in cover as out of cover.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with all the caveats that go around, like, oh, you got one guy out, so now I'm shooting you. Blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, like, there's never a choice you have to make right now, or there's rarely a choice you have to make right now of, like, should I not shoot, or should I, like,
should I target this less important unit that I have more of a chance of killing?
Yeah. Or this very important unit that's farther away, which in a different game might be like, I'm not going to wait. Even though I'm shooting my anti-tank weapon at a tank.
Yeah.
If that anti-tank weapon is fucking weight and I have like a 1 in 10 chance of hitting it, or I can shoot this infantry unit and maybe kill 2 guys, I'd rather go take out those 2 guys.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that isn't there, which I really wish they would put in. Because, like, terrain, and also, like, fucking terrain matters. It should matter. It looks fucking sick. If you don't have, like, back to, like, the board thing.
Yeah.
Like, the Forge World board. Like, if you don't have that shit, it's not gonna, you don't want War Machine. Nobody wants War Machine.
Yeah. Yeah. Give me some cool shit I can put on Instagram. Like, fucking stack that board. Make it dense. Yeah. Give me some cinematic hallways and shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that, too, when we were, like, in the old days. Like, well, I don't think we had this, but I would go pick up games and people would place terrain in like a tournament style of like, one piece in my corner, one piece in my right corner, one piece in your right corner, one small piece in my left corner, one small piece in it's just completely
like, no, make the board dynamic, make it cool.
Look like a thing that would exist.
Narrative.
Yeah.
One side is all city, the other side is all not city.
We used to do that all the time.
Oh, that ruled. Yeah.
But one side is city, the other side is not city but forests.
Yeah. Like,
shit rocks.
Or like fucking like tall ruins on one side with like
suburbs,
small ruins on the other side, you know? That's like my fucking absolute favorite thing. And I mean, like, I think generally we say it as a joke, but I do think that it's serious. Like, it fucking forged the narrative.
Dude, I was like, so when I was playing, and this is something that because we always did this in 40K, but I wish more people would do it when you're setting up. Because it's like fun setting up a little storyline
of like why you're on the table.
Yes, even if it doesn't have to get any more deep than like, this is the refinery, and this is the road that they take into. Because when I was playing Flames of War.
Oh, I love roads. Roads are an underrated fucking piece of terrain in any game.
So yeah, when I was like when we make like a table for Flames of War, it's like, like in the 40s in like Europe or North Africa, like
I'm familiar.
The big war that happened. You'd be like, this is the French town, and this is where the river that they get their water to tend their fields, and the fields are over here. Like, and this is the train that brings good, and it's like,
this was once a vineyard.
Yeah, exactly. And like that shit, and me like another guy being like, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And
this is completely historically accurate.
Exactly. But yeah, like doing that kind of shit before a game is so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it makes the game so much better, even if it's like, if somebody gets like kind of fucked by it.
Totally.
But like, you do it before deployment is even just decided in any way. Like, who cares? And
yeah, you forge the narrative of fighting an uphill battle. Like, that's one of my like memories of like that sort of like time of like a game that neither of us played. This was just a thing that I watched like 7 times on YouTube.
Oh shit, what is this?
The Imperial Guard, it was like a 3,000 point game of like Imperial Guard holding down a fortress against like, so it was like heavily fortified and then just like complete like no terrain on the other side of the board, and it was Imperial Guard holding it down against Tyranids. And the way that they mitigated that was like when a Tyranid model died, I think they house ruled it that on like a 5 up, it would come back at the very far edge of the board. And it was like, that is fucking cool. Like, that's, Dude,
I wish they would bring that kind of mechanic into like a codex. Like, I think instead of
necessarily an orc or an Imperial Guard or a Tyranid player having to have backup models or to buy like triple the amount of troop choices that another player would have.
Mm-hmm.
Just have horde mechanics.
Yeah.
Have like guys come back when they're it would make it better for like you can have like a super shitty unit. You can have like a fucking conscript level guard. You don't have to like boost them up with extra rules. It's just like this unit will always come back. You know what I mean? And you might be able to kill it easily in like a turn or a turn and a half or 2 turns, but it's always going to come back. You have to deal with that. And I get that instead of like having hyper effective weaponry or something like that.
But anyway, okay, so like rather than what we like and don't like about Ninth, like what was the inciting incident of us just like getting back into the hobby in general?
Yeah, I gotta say, I think the elephant in the room is like the pandemic.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Like having nothing to do.
It was the looming threat of a Canadian winter in the pandemic. Because in the summertime, it was like we can go outside and drink beers and it's fine. We can pretend like there isn't a pandemic. And then we hit like September, and it was like, oh
shit!
Oh, this the curve is not flattening. Yeah. We might have to be alone with ourselves for a long time.
Because it was like I remember, like it was like floated that we would do kill team,
and
we were like, I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Like exactly like pandemic, like an activity, and then you fucking get the hook. Like,
I
mean? You like buy a kit, you start doing it, and then like everything that you remember about why it's good, just fucking comes flooding back.
Oh yeah,
and it really hit us hard, I think. And yeah, the fucking universe, really, like that's what gets you excited about modeling. That's what gets you excited about like developing a paint scheme. And once you're there, once you're like have a paint scheme, have an idea of the army that you want to get to, it's hard to shake out of that. You know what I mean? And then it's like we started last winter, played our first game in Ninth a couple days ago.
Yeah, like almost like a full calendar year.
Yeah.
Between
played a lot of kill team,
and I do think that like kill team was like a really big part of it, where it was just like, okay, cool, here's like a low cost kind of entry level thing where we can get back into it. We can like play a bunch of games and do the forge the narrative thing and like set up our boards with like your like fucking like 5 Marines like trying to hold down one building against like my Tyranid kill team is like and like the lore and the aesthetic is never going to not be cool.
Yeah,
it just fucking kicks ass.
Cool.
Yeah.
And too, I gotta say, like Games Workshop makes it easy if you go into kill team to keep you there, because like we bought the like terrain starter, which costs like 3 of us $40 each or whatever like that.
Yeah,
full amount of terrain, so that we didn't have to play with like twigs and fucking beer cans and shit.
Yeah,
and that like was enough to keep us through while we built up 40K.
Yeah,
and it fucking was great times. Like, and you know, I think that wouldn't have that, to be honest, probably wouldn't have happened if the game stores were open. Like, I don't think we probably would have bought terrain.
Doubt it.
You know what I mean?
No.
But I'm glad, because you know we all live in apartments and you know we got fucking gaming spaces. But now we have a way to play a tabletop war game in our apartments, which is fucking sick.
I also think like one of the other things that I want to talk about in terms of coming back is like that the like by and large like the culture of the game seems to have like shifted a little bit in terms of like I still think that there is that like very heavy like internet meta competitive like sort of thing to it.
Thing we've talked about,
but it seems to me that there's a lot more room in the like sort of like global or like online Warhammer community that is like way more open to modeling and painting as part of the hobby.
The tone has shifted. It's so much nicer.
Yeah,
it's so much nicer.
Super supportive in a way that like, you know, like I fucking started like a hobby Instagram, and like I post like, you know, every 6 months or whatever, like because I'm like
hobby
still
Instagram is fucking
super
beautiful.
super
It's
like
people-
slow going on
people
like
be
my
so
shit,
nice.
and people are so nice about it, you know, whereas like I remember like posting fucking models that, albeit were like not, it was like before I learned how to like thin paints or whatever, or like had just learned how to thin paints and like still didn't know how to take a proper picture or whatever. But like I remember posting pictures on like Reddit and like literally having people in the comments be like, you ruined that model.
Yeah.
Like literally have people tell me like I'm fucking like, you know, 19, like fucking like not like a child, but like still
like
fairly
you're
like
excited to show.
I'm just like,
people your
oh, look at
work.
this,
Yeah.
look at this thing that I did, and people being like, you should have just like saved your money, or like I had one
Yeah.
person who was like, you would have been better off just burning that $50.
So fucked.
I'm like, that's an insane thing to say to someone on the internet.
This is
Like-
the reason why I think that like actually the culture must have changed, because Warhammer Reddit now
Mhm.
is super nice.
Yeah.
Like I see people post that level of like just a garbage paint job, just looks like complete trash, but nobody is, that's me being an asshole now. That person is like tried and is
Yeah.
excited to show something, and they've just started, and everybody treats it as such and is encouraging, which is like, in the, like, we're all familiar with the internet. It can be fucking vicious and awful, but it's really, really nice. And then like on Instagram, like you can message someone who has like thousands and thousands of followers and be like, hey man, like what parts are these from on this conversion, and like how did you do your paint job? Like I love it. And they'll be like my experiences have all been like, oh yeah, I got you, man, like this is what I did, this is where the
here's,
bits are
here's
from.
the recipe for like your layers, like,
And it's shocking.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
it's also like, man, like in the fucking like online community, like the list building of it all, like used to be a thing where it was like you would see people go on and be like, hey, like looking at picking up this army because I like the aesthetic, the play style that I'm going for is this, just want suggestions on like a couple of units. And then like people are just like, oh, you know, like that's not really
Scrap it
competitively
all,
viable,
yeah, fuck
scrap
that,
it all, buy 3 Wraith Knights. Like
Yeah,
you
this
know.
is not what like, what are you, a mechanic?
Yeah. And it's like nowadays it's like people being like, all right, here, you're gonna run into some fucking problems, but if that's really what you want to do, try this. Or like, hey, that's a really fun idea for like a really fluffy army, like give this a shot, you know. I like that there is still definitely like that, and maybe it's a thing where like because of the pandemic, like there haven't been tournaments, so like the idea of like competitive tournament play isn't as heavy right now.
And maybe a lot of like people who, because I see this on Reddit a lot, or like even on Instagram sometimes, from like newer people, like new users and new accounts, whatever. It's like, I used to play when I was 10, or I used to play in college or high school, and I'm getting back into it now because the pandemic happened and I needed a hobby, something to do, and like that. Maybe that's like like we know there's been a huge infusion because of the way Games Workshop stock, because like fucking like I mean maybe everyone just bought a lot more Warhammer, but like also I'm sure like a ton of more people like came either completely new or like came back into it, and like that new blood might have been like a huge infusion of like non-neck beard fucking energy, you know what I mean, which might have been nice. Or like, because like, but DACA B still the same.
DACA's still the same?
Yeah,
that's DACA's like the one corner that I haven't like ventured back into, because I just like, and it was also a thing where it's like I was a huge piece of shit on DACA.
You have to be,
because
you
everybody was a
be.
huge piece of shit on DACA.
I've been back on it.
Yeah, motherfuckers still not painting their minis.
Still not painting. Still mad about everything. Still mad when you tell them to paint their minis. Still
paint your minis. If you're listening to this podcast and you fucking do not paint your minis, turn this shit off. Do not
you can paint
do
slow.
not comment, unsubscribe.
You can paint slow. So like, here's the thing. This is the philosophy of the show. If you don't paint your minis, you're not actually a wargamer.
Yeah.
You're not actually doing the thing.
Yeah.
Like, what was the old like metaphors? Like it's like if you're shooting hoops, but you're not playing basketball with people or something. Like you're not
doing the thing. Like you just like to shoot hoops.
You're like,
in
oh,
your-
I don't
in your driveway.
look. Who has the time to dribble? You know?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I just commission all my dribbling.
Doesn't mean you're a bad person, but paint your minis.
fucking minis, or
Disrespectful.
or
You show up
pay somebody else to
Pay-
paint your
yes,
minis. Don't
'cause
show up.
that's-
Fuck gray plastic.
at least respectful to your opponent,
Yeah.
who again is a participant in the fun. Like you need that person.
You're
You know?
playing a game together. You know. Have fun with each other.
It's a message of love at the basis of it.
But yeah, like okay, so DACA notwithstanding, it does seem like the like general culture around the game is a little bit better. We're very fortunate to be here in Toronto,
Yeah.
right? Home of the Hogtown.
Home of the Hogtowner.
Fucking
And the
40K.
Hogtown 40K, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it is Hogtown. That's
Hogtown predates.
Hogtown : home of the Hogtown 40K.
Yeah,
group.
exactly. That's
Our
right.
city's slogan.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's a huge 40K group based in Toronto that we are. I think you're a card carrying dues paying member.
I'm paid.
Oh,
dues
you got to
in a
re
while,
up. You got to re up.
But I
So
I
we're
maintain that I'm grandfathered in because I chose the name.
okay. There you go. I'm always been Hogtown adjacent.
Yeah.
Just kinda
yeah.
orbit
You've
around.
never been a tournament guy.
No.
You got burned when we went to the airport.
yeah. But like there's
So let me ask you this.
Uh-huh.
Does your just being back in any way tickle any I mean you played one game, but are you fancied at all towards ever doing an event in the future? I'm not asking in the sense of like you should or shouldn't. I'm just very curious. Like
here's the thing. I think like an event, yeah, sure. Something like the Escalation League that we did, or like something that's a little bit more like narrative based, like a campaign style event. I'm totally into, love that idea. I would even maybe consider like a kill team tournament if such a thing were to exist.
It would be a new. I think it'd be hard to find a 2018 kill.
Fuck shit. All right. Well, I'm gonna organize a 2018 kill team tournament of just me and you.
Yeah.
But like full-fledged tournament play, I don't know, mostly just because like I'm very tied up in Tyranids right now and I don't want to buy like 20 Hive Guard
Yeah.
because that seems to be
for
the
sure.
only viable like thing for that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing of like there's a problem with 40K in the sense that you have to, if you want to play a tournament and you don't want to just get fucking destroyed, you have to, there's a cost associated with that.
Yeah.
You have to buy not just a money cost, a time cost of like painting
And like a mental and like cost of your soul of playing a bunch of units that you don't
Dude,
actually like.
the fucking that's real, dude. Like
Yeah.
when you're like sitting across the table and you're playing a game and you look down and you're like, I fucking hate this model, and it's yours.
Yeah.
And you spent hours painting it. And you're like, he looks like fucking shit. Why?
And then you look across the table and the dude's army isn't even painted.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You know what? Like in terms of like event shit, one of my favorite things that we did in 7th, like before we kind of like got out, was you went online and you found all of the event scenarios for the LVO. And you just and you just printed those off, and they were like really, really great sort of like custom scenarios with like cool maps. And like we just played a bunch of like fun narrative games using like those specific like objective rules and deployment zones and like that kind of shit. So it's like, if people are doing tournaments with like sick rules, I'm down to just like take those and play fun games.
But the thing is, like, they don't do that anymore. Because like all like the LVO style of like rules is what is now evolved into the base 40K rules. Because remember in like the LVO stuff, it was like you have your secondaries.
Right.
Like that's where that comes from.
Okay.
I think I'm like pretty sure.
Yeah.
So and like that like primary secondary matched play blah 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 like that was developed to be a tournament standard thing because like GW didn't do tournaments for like 10 years.
Right.
And that's when like all of the like LVO stuff like stepped in to take that on.
Okay.
And because it was so successful, And GW eventually, when their leadership changed, we're like letting this part of the like promotion of our game go.
Right.
They baked that into the new rules.
Oh, that's cool.
So like,
good for them
yes.
for like listening to their fucking customer base,
like,
right?
That's like
that's
one
sick.
of, like there's they deserve props for a lot of things with the way it's going now, but like excuse me, and maybe because we haven't gone into like the narrative play missions and maybe that's what we need to do,
dude. Yeah, I'm like I think overall, like at the end of the day, it's a thing where it's like to say that like. Yes, the pandemic was like an inciting incident to get back into it, but now that we're back here and seeing the way the landscape has changed and seeing the way that like yeah, to an extent, Games Workshop has like really listened to their customer base and been like, here, we're going to give you Plastic Sisters. We're going to fucking like do these like interesting tournament scenarios and like that kind of stuff is like, I'm like, we just got back. We just got here and I'm fresh, I'm sure. Pretty stoked. Like, I think it is in a good spot and I do
totally like yeah, to counter, I think like to counter like, we were talking about the things that we didn't like because we went from like what we didn't like about 7th into like an 8th.
It was an easy transition.
Yeah, but like it fucking felt so good when my Repentia just decimated your card effects. Yeah. Like and like that's what I think the current 40k edition does is like, yes, there's a lot of rules. Yes, there's a lot of stratagems. It's probably too much. But when you actually pull something off, when you're like, I built it this way and I positioned it in a way where I can give the bonus to the unit and then I can just fucking hit like a fucking dump truck.
Yeah.
Feels really good.
Yeah.
It does feel good.
And it's, those fucking cool narrative scenarios of like a bunch of like chicks with blindfolds on cutting down a giant space lizard is like, it's good to be back.
It's so good to be back. And yeah, it's a good ass game and the models will always be cool and the setting will like always be cool.
As long as they don't like Age of Sigmar a 40k.
Yeah. You know about Gilliman?
Robert?
Yeah.
Bobby G?
Bobby G? Do you know about this motherfucker?
I've heard of him.
Oh my god, it's so stupid. It's so stupid. Like, I'm not gonna go into like the lore behind it, but like, you know how like 40k, the whole point is like there's no good guys.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby G is like a good guy.
Oh,
he's like a very good guy. You know that you seen the picture of the 9th edition rulebook? It's like Abaddon fighting Bobby G.
Okay, yeah.
Like angel and demon kind of thing. It's too much personality. Like 40k was everyone's supposed to be. And this is we've talked about like last episode we talked about like characters having too much space.
Yeah.
Too much personality. Like it's a galaxy.
Yeah.
3 characters is hardly a galaxy. Like like it has to be.
Tell that to my good friend Scuzzwort Grugbag III and his faithful grot.
Yeah. Anyway, I hope they don't continue because like there is a trend of over personification and over like literally with the Bobby G thing. It's like here's a beacon of hope. And it's like that is
right, like kind of against the lore.
It's not even like yes, it is against the lore, but it's like it's actually like I worry about it in the sense of like it might like that kind of thing. Like they keep going that direction, might be like a toxin that kills what has made 40k continue for 40 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's a reason that like people get like teens and like tweens and children. And adults and like literally of all ages get attracted to this game and this setting. I think it has a large part to do with like the hopelessness of it. Like
sure, yeah.
Because like, how are we doing on time, by the way?
We're like about an hour.
All right, let me wrap up on this point.
Okay.
I worry about the Bobby G thing.
Yeah,
and maybe we can cut this and come back to another episode if we want to.
Mm-hmm.
But like, kind of bleeding into last episode, but when I was like, you grew up in the 90s when it was like, the Soviet Union fell and it's all about like
I'm familiar.
The end of history, that whole like philosophical idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like liberalism is one,
It's all about being good. And then you get served this setting that's like, actually the far future is a fucking nightmare, and it's all of the worst things about humanity all of the time, everywhere. Hate and ignorance. And if you fuck with that, I think you kind of like, you risk getting rid of what makes it good.
True. Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't come back for Bobby G is what I'm saying.
We're not here for Bobby G, and we're not here for Gray Plastic. All right. Yeah, I think that hits on all the major ins and outs.
Ins and outs, yeah. Yeah, we're back.
All right.
This is the thesis.
Hobby progress? Are we doing
progress.
that? We finishing every episode with hobby progress, hobby goals?
It's going to be called Connor's Shame Corner.
Oh, dude, it's my shame corner too. Ask me what my hobby progress between the last episode and this episode
What
is.
was your hobby progress?
We played one game of Ninth.
Hey, that was the core objective of our hobby progress, though. And we did do that.
Also, I said I was going to paint 5 Gloomhaven minis, and I didn't do that.
Did you paint one Gloomhaven mini?
I put a base layer of brown on one guy's coat.
That's okay. I painted a bunch of 10mm shoes on my crossbowman. Well, I painted. So my stretch goal was my sister's Repentia, which I didn't fucking even come close to. But my War Master crossbowmen, I painted their tabards and their hats and their mustaches and their shoes and their crossbows. I just have to paint the banner and metallics.
It would be quicker for you to tell me what you haven't painted on these 10mm guys.
It's like an accumulated maybe 1 inch of surface area that I've like actually painted.
Yeah.
What's your goal for next week, Campbell?
Well, we're doing a little Secret Santa. I don't know when this episode's gonna come out. Like probably not till like fucking January or February. But like we're in the distant past. To you right now, dear listener, in the distant past, we were participating in a little hobby Secret Santa with our friends. And I need to do the entire mini.
Yeah, I need to purchase,
including buying. Yes.
Yeah. Simon turned me on to brush primer, which I'm really excited about.
Okay.
No spray. Well, wintertime.
Yeah.
Anyway, getting off topic.
Better for the environment.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm doing it for the planet.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my hobby goal for next episode is to have my Secret Santa finished, because if I don't, there's going to be a disappointed little boy. I'll just give him a lump of coal instead.
Yeah. I got you dice.
Yeah.